Welcome back to Reimagine. Here we are in January of 2021. It's a year full of hope, full of optimism. 2020 was a bit of a rough year for some, but a year of great opportunity for others. As they say, chaos is a ladder, and some have certainly climbed high in that regard. In continuing the great notions of this conference and the promise that we're going to bring you some of the best and most insightful speakers in the space, we're joined now by none other than Tim Draper, venture capitalist supreme, entrepreneur extraordinaire, a man who needs little introduction. So I'll just say, Tim, thank you so much for joining us.
Terrific. Well, thanks, Asher. Thanks for having me on your show.
All right, Tim, let's get straight into things. We're recording this in January 2021. A new administration has just taken over in the US. We've got vaccines on the horizon, sort of coming out into the world. There seems to be a light at the end of a potentially dark tunnel. If you could give us an overview, Tim, what are you focused on? What are you optimistic for? What are you pessimistic for in the state of the world right now?
Well, I'm always optimistic about Bitcoin. I think that it brings on a world that is more global and open and transparent, and it flattens the world. It allows all of us to operate with the same currency, and that brings on, and that technology, Bitcoin, brings on the blockchain and smart contracts, which will automate the accounting and the legal business. And then with artificial intelligence, combined with those technologies, it has the potential to transform the biggest industries in the world and open them up so that we're more of a global world and less of a tribal world. This is a really important time, and we've now coming down to what's going on today. We just had the inauguration. I think that the choice for the head of the SEC was extraordinary. Gary Gensler, he is a brilliant man, and hopefully he'll be able to train the rest of the old guard on Bitcoin and crypto and the importance of them, and how great they can be for the people, not just in America but around the world.
So interesting. Oh, sorry, Tim. Yeah. Sorry to cut you off.
So I think that a lot of the appointments and the Senate and the hang on again.
No problem.
The Senate, it's an old group. And if you ask somebody who's 30 years or younger whether they'd rather have one Bitcoin or $30,000, they'd all take the Bitcoin. If they're 35 years or older, they'll all take the dollars. That's about the age at which there's a break. And most of the people who represent us are much, much older. And they are many of them are missing the point. And we need the younger voices to speak out louder so that we're not still 10 years from now trapped in a fiat world.
So, I find it interesting. You mentioned Gary Gensler there, and obviously an important appointment, SEC chief. But on the flip side of that, at the same time, we've got incoming as the Treasury Secretary, the likes of Janet Yellen, who does certainly represent that old guard you just mentioned, and has already come out early on in the piece saying she's no fan of Bitcoin. Does this represent a concern for you? Are you worried that this is the old guard keeping the industry back? How do you take such statements?
Yeah, that's where I think Gary would be very helpful in educating the whole group. They all should hear what he has to say, because yeah, clearly it started out that way. But look, if you're a criminal, you'd much rather operate in cash. Bitcoin keeps a perfect record on the blockchain. And if Janet just went and talked to the U.S. Marshal's Office, she'd understand that the U.S. Marshal's Office has made it very has made it very clear that they're actually catching everybody who's trying to do something nefarious in Bitcoin. Yeah, so if you're a criminal operating cash, because Bitcoin, you're going to be caught. With Bitcoin, you're going to be caught because the blockchain keeps a perfect record of every single transaction that happens. So I think she's got it wrong, but that was the early rhetoric of Bitcoin. That's the first thing people heard about with Bitcoin, but they didn't realize that all those people got caught. And there are still some dark coins, and I can understand her being very concerned about the dark coins, but certainly not about Bitcoin or Ethereum at this point.
Certainly, it does seem like as the industry is professionalizing, as we're seeing some of those more institutional players come on board. I mean, yourself excluded, you've been here for a while, but the other institutional players start to come on board. We're seeing a bit of a changing of the space. And I'd love to tap your brain a little bit, Tim, for your perspective on these, bigger institutional players now starting to take things more seriously. There's a lot of hype, a lot of media buzz around these players coming on, obviously the likes of Michael Saylor back in 2020 coming on board, PayPal, these guys coming in. It seems like a big deal from the outside. As an insider in the space, is it as big as it's being portrayed, or is there a bit of bluster going on that's pumping up this market?
Yeah, I think Bitcoin has hit that sort of credibility moment where early on it was a bunch of yahoos playing games and trying different things. Now the software is getting mature enough around Bitcoin so that we can all I feel very comfortable about moving it in and out of a Coinbase account or a ledger, knowing that it is value, has value, is a easy, simple trading system, and can be custodied, and that means that the bigger institutions can start feeling more comfortable as fiduciaries taking Bitcoin as one of their currencies. But now actually the way people are thinking about Bitcoin is changing, and that means that people are going from yes, it's okay now to use it as an institutional currency, to I have to own some of this because it's a hedge against inflation. So they've gone from sort of opportunity to I have to do it because I've got downside if I don't. If I think that if in March, after the government's printing all this money, it creates inflation. And I think around March 31st, when people are starting to have to report on the ownership they have of various stocks and bonds and currency, I think they're going to have to show that they own some Bitcoin too, because it's another alternative asset. It's an asset that is a really good hedge against a couple of things. One is a hedge against rampant fiat printing, which creates inflation. So it's a hedge against inflation, but it's also it's the currency of the future. So it's a hedge against the future coming and hitting you sideways. So I think people are now starting to look at it as more of a hedge. I'm still thinking that it is the entire world is going to be operating with cryptocurrencies in 3 or 4 years, and we're going to look at fiat. We're going to look back at fiat as the old tribal way instead of looking forward, instead of this new global way. And I think 3 or 4 years from now, somebody at Starbucks will laugh at you if you try to pay with fiat. I think they're all going to be, everything's going to be crypto. It's so much easier. If I had to send you money right now, it'd be so much easier to send it in Bitcoin than it is to send it. What do? I have to call my assistant to call the bank, have the bank arrange a wire. The wire would have to then get to your bank. You'd have to come get. I mean, if I need to send you Bitcoin, it's like, oh, here, yeah, what's your account number? Boom, done.
Right. But I can't help but think, I love the predictions that say that in 3, 4 years, here we are, we'll already have switched over, we'll already be fully crypto integrated. But I can't help but wonder, maybe myself, maybe, people of, as you said, below 35 and in that sort of generational gap. But then I look at, let's say my own parents, grandparents, whomever, aunts, uncles, and I sort of think they're not going to give up their credit cards and their banking systems and their legacy finance systems so quickly, are they? So, I mean, what needs to be done before we're getting those guys on board?
Well, I think what's happening right now with companies like OpenNode and others, that the retailers are now saying, I accept Bitcoin. And when the retailers, e-tailers, they all say, I accept Bitcoin, and they'll say, I accept Bitcoin, and you can save 2.5% to 4%. The consumer is going to come that way because they've been paying 2.5% to 4% to the bank every time you swipe your credit card. And that's money they're not going to have to pay anymore. There is some transaction cost to Bitcoin, but it's very small by comparison.
But that'll
be the crowning blow where retailers kind of go, yeah, I'm going to give a bigger discount for Bitcoin because I want everybody to be using it.
But doesn't it get back then, circling back around to the regulatory question, don't we get back to the point where if it's being still treated like property as it is in, many sort of Western legal jurisdictions, the US, Australia, various other countries that are sort of still treated in that sense and still treat each transaction as a taxable event, isn't that going to hold back this industry until regulators finally get off their ass and start treating this more like a currency and an actual, day-to-day system?
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think the thing that's going to move people off the dime in the US are all the other countries in the world that are saying, bring it on. We are, we're going to just do a transaction tax, or we're set up that if you set up your business completely in Bitcoin, we will just tax you in Bitcoin. I mean, I think that's the, and once that happens in other countries, then over time, the US will be sort of pressured into moving. It's the big incumbents are always the slowest to move, and we're the biggest, the US, we're the biggest incumbent. And we got a big boat, and that boat's not going to turn on a dime. But if you're in Malta or Gibraltar, or I guess in Japan, they move much faster.
Right. So, similarly, I mean, the argument often gets made that some of those countries that actually don't have established legacy financial systems, we're talking in the developing world and in emerging markets, may be able to leapfrog into getting ahead by now dialing into this new blockchain ecosystem. I mean, is that a narrative you buy, and what implications do you think that could have?
Well, they're already doing that. The people on the ground are already doing that. They would rather use Bitcoin than their own currencies. Certainly, if you own Nigerian naira or Argentinian pesos, you're not building anything for the future. You don't believe that those pesos are going to be worth that much in a year. So why build a business on pesos? So you'd much rather build a business on something that's going to be stable and where no one can print more, like Bitcoin. So these a lot of these countries are controlled by, there are some that are just controlled by corrupt dictators, and they have made it very difficult for people to want to build things of value, because they either take it away or they devalue their currency or they print more currency, so that you build something of value and suddenly it's worth half what it was 6 months ago. And that's not a powerful force for future development. But the engineers, the people on the ground, the hardworking entrepreneurs, they are all building things of value, and the way they're doing it is they're building things on Bitcoin. So I think this is it's an education. I mean, the regulators just have to be educated. They have to see that by being draconian against some new technology like this, you're going to set your country back 40 years. And if you are open to new ways of doing things, your country will be one of the winners in the next 40 years. China had a huge brain exodus, a huge brain drain when China said Bitcoin's illegal here. And Japan smartly made Bitcoin a national currency, and a lot of those great entrepreneurs left China, moved to Japan. Same thing's happening all over the world. The countries of the world, the governments of the world are in competition for the great minds and the capital and the entrepreneurs and the businesses of the world. And they're all starting to recognize it. The US, we've been able to sort of rest on our laurels for a while, but that's not true anymore. The US has to be forward thinking in their regulations. They have to accept new technologies. The smartest thing the US did was to lay off on the internet and allow it to grow, because all of the great entrepreneurial successes in the internet, most of them came from the US. And when China laid off on regulations around the internet, they were able to build some of the great internet companies of the world too. Now China's getting draconian, and you're not going to see a lot more entrepreneurial activity coming out of there unless they open up again. And I think also in the U.S., I think we're going to lose our entrepreneurs if our regulators get heavy-handed.
I mean, Tim, do you think that the 2020 and the coronavirus pandemic and what it did to sort of the way the globe interacts with itself, do you think that was a bit of a tipping point, based on what you're speaking about people being able to, the US in particular, being able to sit on its laurels and just expect people to flood in? Nowadays, there's a situation where work from home has become normalized. People are more and more likely to be working for a company that either is centralized in another country or doesn't even have a centralized office, and they're working from anywhere else in the world. And when you've got countries at the cutting edge, like Estonia, for example, offering digital citizenship, I mean, is this actually, was 2020 the year we're all going to remember as an inflection point for this shift and brain drain, across the world to the best opportunities?
Yeah, and all the the U.S. has done a lot. The unions in the U.S. have done a lot to protect the worker. But now, if you're an employer, you recognize that your worker, by a Zoom call, it doesn't matter what country they're in and where they're physically located. And so it is going to flatten what the value of a worker is. And Bitcoin helps with that, where you're going to be, as an employer, you're going to say, well, why don't I hire these engineers from Eastern Europe? Because I'm not going to be able to see my team anyway. I might as well hire people that are, 20% the cost. and I don't need to worry about their healthcare. They'll take care of their own healthcare. I don't need to worry about their, whether I say something wrong, politically incorrect or not. My workers are all spread out around the world, and they all have different value systems. I think it's actually very exciting. I think it's a really interesting time to start a business. For those of you who are out there thinking, I want to start a business, this is a great time. You can start a business that's completely remote. It can be completely on Zoom calls. The team can, excuse me. It's a deep cough though, not COVID.
No, we're not in the same room. It doesn't.
I don't think I can spread it to you this way.
No.
No, I think this is a really exciting time to start a business because everyone around the world has an equal footing or an almost equal footing because they have a smartphone. Almost everyone around the world has a smartphone. They have access to all the information that all the other people have access to. And you're seeing great engineering talent coming from places all over the world. We're seeing globalization, whether I didn't like the wall, I didn't like the trade war, I didn't like those things in the last administration, and I'm hoping this administration reaches out and recognizes that we are one world on this planet, and we're all better off trading with each other. If I have a house and you have a farm and we don't trade, I die of starvation, you die of exposure. You multiply that by the 8 billion people in the planet. They're all doing something that supports all the other people on the planet in some way or another. And if you start putting barriers up, that's dangerous. I think that's a bad sign, and it hurts your own people more than it hurts the people you're trying to attack with it. So I think open systems, free trade, all these things are so important for people. And the wealthiest countries are the freest countries. God, sorry about that.
Not a problem at all. Tim, and it's a powerful vision you lay out there, and a vision of change and a vision of opportunity. And I kind of want to talk to you a little bit about this idea of vision a little bit, and tap into something from your own personal history, something which may seem like ancient history to some watching, all the way back in 2014, when you first decided to spend a cool $19 million buying nearly 30,000 Bitcoin from the US Marshals that had been seized off the Silk Road. That's one of my favorite stories of crypto and Bitcoin history personally. And I suppose I just want to ask a little bit about your thought process at the time, at a time when none of your peers and none of the other sort of institutional grade venture capitalists out there were even thinking about Bitcoin and taking it seriously. What led you to that point at such a volatile time in its history?
Well, I figured that if Bitcoin didn't work, it was going to go to zero anyway. And if Bitcoin did work, it was going to be extraordinary because people around the world are really trying to do some really interesting things with Bitcoin during that time. And it was a bit of the Wild West, but I kept thinking, well, this is better currency. This is going to be really important for the world. And and I knew most of the people who were bidding, who bid on the U.S. Marshals auction. And everybody I was talking to was saying, how big a discount do you think you're going to get to market? And I looked and I thought, I don't care whether I'm paying 618 or 632. This could end up being much, much bigger than anybody thinks. So I bid 632. And what was wild was I was thinking maybe I'd get one lot, maybe two. I got all 9 lots. And at that point I went, I'm kind of good with this. Being the highest bidder, and then the Bitcoin price went straight down to like 190. and I looked like the biggest idiot. But on the other hand, I kept thinking, this is really important for the world. And I can see that, the banks are going to resist it. Some of the old autocrats are going to resist it. The dictators are going to resist it. But the people are going to want this. The people of the world are going to want this. And having a trusted third party that's not that bank that has the big fancy buildings and the fancy suits, and, the people who are taking your money and moving it around and manipulating it. Instead, you actually control your money on like your smartphone or on a crypto device. I looked and I said, this is the way people are going to want to operate. And so that was what got me going. And I also felt like it was good because I lost about the same number of Bitcoin when in 2011 or something. I was working with Coin Lab, and they stored their Bitcoin at the Mount Gox, and Mount Gox kind of disappeared all the money. And we were just completely out of Bitcoin. So this was a nice way for me to sort of go, okay, well, I've still got my Bitcoin. It just cost me a little more.
Yeah, a little bit more of expensive recoup of the losses, although, as you say, in history's books, I don't think anyone's going to make much of a difference between 618 and 632. And, we're sitting at 30,000 today, and all-time highs at 42. And who knows where we'll be in the next few weeks and months ahead. But, Tim,
well,
I guess
a Bitcoin will always still be a Bitcoin, but as these other currencies are very volatile against Bitcoin as they slowly disappear from the scene.
A perfect way to envisage it from, as you say, maybe the more modern millennial perspective. As you say, Tim, you had that vision for the future. You saw that this is something that people could use. It's something that I always like to think about in today's world. The young entrepreneur, the visionary who wants to go out there and identify a good vision, and they see something they think they like, but maybe it's all just in their head. They don't have the banks validating it, the big institutions validating it for them, and they've just got to go out on their own. What sort of advice would you give in that? How do you not fall for a scam and something that seems too good to be true? And how do you identify something that really has promise?
I find I'm okay with failing. I encourage young people to fail and fail again until they succeed. I think you learn much better by doing than you do by trying to outsmart everybody or think of all the things that could go wrong. I tend to think that I'm better off just thinking, well, what if it works? How big will it get? How extraordinary will this be if this works? And that kind of an approach and an attitude can really improve a young person's perspective. And schooling today is really so much tied to not making mistakes. You get an A if you don't make any mistakes. But if you do something extraordinary in school, which I did at certain times, you either get the A+ or you fail. And that's a big risk in school. But out in the real world, the fail doesn't matter much, and the big A+ matters a lot. And so I think in terms of going out there, failing until you succeed. And it's what I tell all my students at Draper University. So I encourage all of you, if you have some sort of a passion, you have some real interest in something, to come see if you can get into Draper University, because we help you sort of change your mindset from one who's sort of an apt pupil to one who is entrepreneurial and willing to go out there and do whatever it takes to make the company successful or to make that vision a reality. And we do that we have an online school that's 2 weeks, and then we have a hero training that's 6 weeks. And both can lead you to funding from Draper Associates or other venture capitalists. So it's it's an exciting thing. And if you have a business and you get it kind of going, you can go to Meet the Drapers and be on our show. My dad, my sister, and my daughter and I have this show where we allow entrepreneurs on, and they get crowdfunded by the viewers. It's great. And we act a little like Shark Tank, but a little nicer, I think. And the entrepreneurs we have are much more fundable than what you see on Shark Tank, where it's like a, gum scraper or whatever. You get real entrepreneurs doing real business.
That could be the next $1 billion idea, a gum scraper.
Gum scraper, man. Big deal.
It's the next great vision. All right, Tim, I just want to ask you as well. I mean, and we touched on this just lightly just before, but we've seen $3.9 trillion of stimulus enter the US markets already in big stimulus packages. We're talking about another 1.9 trillion. That number still sounds, that word still sounds strange in my head, trillion. Coming in proposed under the Biden administration. We're seeing stocks up and up and up, and assets up and up and up and up, and it seems endless. Tim, in your professional financial advice, is this bubble going to burst? Are we all done for and just waiting for the inevitable pop? And what does that pop look like?
Well, it pops when the bankers lose their mind and start lending to people to buy stocks or whatever. So I don't think it's popping now. What's happening now is the government is printing money, about $86 trillion out there right now, by printing 3.9 trillion and then another 1.9 trillion. You're actually having a profound effect on the value of a dollar. It's dropping pretty rapidly as you print more of these things because there are more of them out there, and so it's less valuable. And so that argues for people to operate in Bitcoin, because if this continues and you get into a inflationary spiral, you start sending a message to your people that if you build something of value in dollars, they are not that it's going to be worth less each year, and that is not a healthy that's not a healthy way for a country to operate. So if everybody starts thinking in terms of building those things in Bitcoin, they're going to be better off. The stock market, I think it's still pretty early. You're seeing a few more and more companies go public when there's this frenzy of like everything that you fund goes public. Then you definitely need to think about changing out and getting into Bitcoin or real estate or gold or something that's more that's a little less ethereal.
Something.
I don't give advice. Ever since I gave my father-in-law some advice to buy a stock and it went from 12 to 2, I have pretty much had no more advice. You can watch what I do, but you cannot. Don't ask me what you should do.
Okay, fair enough. Point well taken. Not formal financial advice here, just the musings of a couple of guys back and forth. All right, then let's just drill in quickly. Looking at 2021. Here we are. As I started off, there's a bit of a light at the end of the tunnel feel for some people, whether that be in vaccines coming down the pipeline, whether that be in new stimulus checks, whatever that looks like to various people of various walks of life. Is there anything, Tim, that you're looking out for from an innovation perspective, a market perspective, a societal perspective? Is there something that you think in 2021 is going to be defining or game changing that you see coming down the pipeline?
Well, I think people have become a little more introverted, and that has been healthy for some and very unhealthy for others. And I think when the vaccine goes throughout the population and we all are able to go back out and connect with people, I think people are going to be a little still reticent to give each other hugs and all that stuff. But I think it's going to, I think you're going to start seeing it happen again. And I think people are sort of itching to travel again. And I think they're itching to get out and see what that world's about again. But I think they might think in terms of a little bit more, I can handle my work from my Zoom calls, and then I get together with my team for brainstorming and for other, social connection. And that I think will change, the work world will change. I think we're going to see fewer people going to work every day from 9 to 5. I think that's not going to happen. I think people are now used to sort of maybe going in once a week. And I think they'll go back to maybe 3 times a week, something like that. And the rest of the time they'll work from home. I think that the travel business has gotten very lean, and I think they'll probably be very profitable for a while people are all trying to jump back in the travel. I think it's going to be a really interesting time, and hopefully we all, get back to, that wild frenzy where we get to go to rock concerts and conferences and sports games and all that stuff. And we don't have to worry about spreading a horrible virus to each other. I think this is going to be a really interesting year. I think we're going to learn a lot about each other, and hopefully we won't have. If they keep us all locked in for much longer, we're going to have some of the biggest mental health problems that any society has ever had. And so hopefully we'll be set free, and people will be less concerned once they've gotten the vaccine. So it's interesting, interesting. And I kind of like the changeover to the new president. I like that he's sort of trying to keep peace and make and build olive branches around the world again. I think that things swing back and forth. This is a good time to swing toward building peace.
Yeah, it's an important point you made there about mental health. I think something that's going to potentially affect a lot of people out there, and something people need to be looking out for each other for. Just quickly as well, I mean, this is just something I think about a lot in regards to this. Any concerns about the value of commercial property and what the business districts of cities are going to look like in the future if we're all working from home, at least part-time?
Yeah, I think you'll have more office sharing. I think that's probably not a positive for commercial real estate. I think you'll have people will still want to get to the office, I think, but I don't think they're going to want to go to the office every single day of the week. There is something, when I go to the office and I see my team, we are all re-energized. When we're all on Zoom calls, we tend to drift a little bit. But when we're all together, it's like, oh, we're working for a reason. We're all connecting for a reason. We have a goal. We have a mission. I think that's not going to go away, but I wouldn't be surprised if people start office sharing a lot more. And then I think that the WeWork model was probably a good one, you know, but maybe it's even more of an arrangement where people can kind of come and go from the office, use conference rooms, go back home, and maybe their office is at home, but their conferences and their meetings are all at the office. And so that can probably change what commercial real estate looks like. And we have a place, Hero City, that's an incubator, and it's been empty, pretty empty for the last year. And now we're kind of thinking we're actually trying to imagine what that world will look like so that we can design accordingly. And we're sort of struggling with it. We do think that we probably have more people will be required to fill that space than it was before. And the separation of the desks, I think, will not have to happen in the future. I think the desks can go back together once we've all got the vaccine. So I think, yeah, it's going to be interesting. I think residential real estate, I think people moved out of the cities pretty quickly, and I don't know if they're going to want to go back in unless they feel like they have to be close to their work. Because if people want a little land to walk around on, I think, and the cities have not really done well during this time. Coming out of this, will they come back? I think so.
Cities have a way to bounce back. Certainly, at least the good ones do, perhaps. But we'll see how that spreads out. All right, last question, last statement before I let you go, Tim. This is a hype cycle. We're seeing so much new blood enter the space, as it were, and that blood can be literal depending on how the market moves. Any advice to anyone new coming into the crypto and blockchain world? Anything to look out for? Any lessons you wish you'd known, although it was a different time when you were first investing?
Well, I think it's the currency of the future. It's so much easier to use. It's open, it's global. You can use it in any country. It's transparent. It's decentralized, so no one, or most of them are decentralized. They're not all, but most of them are decentralized. Bitcoin and Ethereum, and Tezos, they're all decentralized. And so I think the reason you would trade your fiat for Bitcoin is really because you're taking old currency that is becoming less valuable over time for new currency that's becoming more valuable over time. It seems like an obvious thing to do, but there is always risk attached to that too. But yeah, I think you generally want to be moving toward the future, because the future does show up eventually. And so I think that's where you want to be. You want to be, I think 5 years from now, I think I'm going to be much happier holding a bunch of Bitcoin than a bunch of dollars. I own more Bitcoin than dollars, and I will continue to.
Well, powerful statement, and I think you said it right there. The future does show up eventually. Tim Draper, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us, and for all those watching, stick with us in Reimagine. We've got so much valuable and important and insightful content on the way here for the rest of the conference.
Terrific. Thanks so much for having me on your show, Asher.